morning. I definitely couldn't have introduced myself better. So let's see how this cooking turns out. But I also liked what Camille said, that technology is primarily just a means to achieve a goal. Because most of us don't create this technology per se for profit, but we use it to accomplish other tasks, creating value within our business. And today I would like to talk about how this technology and the use of various technologies, different cloud providers, allow us to focus on achieving and building value, rather than seeing it as an obstacle or problem, considering that we might have too many choices regarding the availability of what's on the market. So, in a way, when I saw this picture, it immediately reminded me of the presentation I had to prepare. In the comments under this picture, someone also aptly noted, but where is the handle for registration? Yes, so it might not be so easy to get out of. Such a technology cage, sometimes. If we have the impression that we are stuck with our solutions, with our technology stack in a certain place, it's worth actually looking around and being open to new ideas. And I think that's what you will be able to hear about today. We will talk about examples, specifically examples from essentially two companies with which we had the opportunity to work, but we see that these are examples that are very often repeated. One of these examples is a service company, a large enterprise, a company that worked with Microsoft technologies, even before using Azure Cloud, utilizing both the Office suite and SQL Server databases. So I think it's a classic example of establishing oneself as a company within a certain technology, a very popular and good technology, but this translates into specific knowledge that is already being built within our teams. This translates into certain organizational habits. It translates into long-term relationships, contracts, and strong relationships with partners we work with external vendors. We may also be accustomed to the user experience of using these applications, for example, in the area of reporting, where our teams are so strongly accustomed to Power BI that we cannot change this solution to any other because it is simply impractical. But business does not stand still. Business evolves and seeks new challenges, looking for new ways to generate value. And that was the case here, where besides providing services, this company was building new digital products. These digital products were based on web and mobile applications, which posed new challenges. These challenges primarily involve collecting new data, new categories of data, because if we talk about classic systems, let's say ERP or desktop applications, we can fully control this data through the core of our application. And if we talk about web applications, mobile applications, there are certain ecosystems without which it's hard to imagine the functioning of such applications. And it cannot be denied that the Google ecosystem is heavily used, where in terms of analytical data, for web analytics, we use Google Analytics, and for marketing, we use Google Ads. When it comes to the mobile application ecosystem, Firebase is heavily used. And to develop these digital products, this company, whether they wanted to or not, had to consider how to integrate this data, how to use this data to consciously develop these products. To solve such a problem, a truly comprehensive view of the ecosystem is needed without getting stuck on certain perspectives that we know and understand, and taking a step back to consider what we can do And this is how we always try to work with clients, by analyzing the full picture of what the company is struggling with. Analyze what works, what can continue to work, what will become a bottleneck in some time, and what needs to be addressed now, and how we can help. We are fortunate to work with various companies and technologies, which allows us to have an overview of all the tools available on the market and see in which applications they perform better or worse. And it was the same in this case, where we analyzed the maturity level of the client's teams in specific areas of using this technology, which was already being utilized. We assessed what the needs are in terms of integrating this new data, how to do it most easily, to what extent the client is willing, for example, to invest, how much time and resources they have available to dedicate to the integration of this new data, and to what extent it is not a priority, and how much of a priority delivering any value at all in the first step is. And thus, a hybrid multi-cloud architecture was created, which we proposed and implemented. And it would be best to simply see it in a picture, where the Azure ecosystem, which was already functioning in the cloud for the client, remained practically untouched, because it was a working, well-oiled machine built over many years, based on many processes and teams. So there was no business sense in modifying this ecosystem. However, in terms of new data, as I mentioned, the Google ecosystem is very advanced in certain areas, such as collecting analytical, web, and mobile data, and this also translates to the Google Cloud Platform, to BigQuery, and to the excellent and native integrations that have been developed within this ecosystem. Building these integrations in a custom, specialized way, attempting to deliver this data directly within the Azure ecosystem would be time-consuming, inefficient, would take a lot of time, and would create maintenance issues in the future. In this case, it was much easier to focus on what we can accomplish quickly, and we can connect two clouds very quickly. Regarding authorization, we don't have to worry about maintaining dual accounts for our employees, because by using Intra ID in Azure, we can log in directly to the GCP cloud platform, and access there can be restricted to a specific group of employees. Meanwhile, by using these native integrations, data lands in the BigQuery warehouse very quickly and seamlessly, and from there, whether to Google Cloud Storage, we can export it so that Snowflake has direct access. In some cases, specific data after initial processing can be exported to the data lake on Azure. So we have native integration and immediately several options that allow us to meet specific business needs in various ways. If we want to experiment with this data, if we want to open this ecosystem for our data scientists so they can build data products without yet transferring the entire set of this data to the existing data warehouse, they can do so in the same way on Google Cloud Platform, whether by using notebooks in BigQuery or by using AI and ML services within Vertex. So we combine the best of both ecosystems. We do it natively, we do it quickly, we do it cost effectively. This also opens up the option for further experimentation and possibly at some point making the decision to fully migrate from Snowflake to BigQuery. We have also conducted such migrations, but in this context, it best addressed the client's needs and primarily generated benefits, ensuring evolution without turning everything upside down, without a revolution. The entire process was completed quickly over the course of a few weeks. Access to data was easy. As I mentioned, we have the ability to test new solutions and gradually adapt them without the fear of a large migration, a big project, all while using native logging and user authentication so seamlessly. But let's move on to newer technologies. Of smaller enterprises, we work a lot with enterprises, with gaming companies, and we had a great example of how to use the combination of two clouds based on very scrubbed requirements. The client came to us with the problem that they need to report and analyze data in real time, truly real time, with a delay of only a few seconds at most. Because in their mobile games, they analyze how many games are open and where to shift resources. Certain teams analyze this data live and move resources within the application ecosystem to promote specific games and activities. But the client was using a functioning, well-operating infrastructure on AWS, which was working great. However, they had a problem with the data warehouse. With the data warehouse, that required scaling. It required manual scaling. This meant it created problems when suddenly the data influx was much higher than anticipated. And conversely, when the game traffic was low, it generated high costs. And similarly, in this case, we focused on an in-depth analysis of what worked well. The existing infrastructure and database related to games, which powered this data warehouse. What didn't work perfectly? The data warehouse, which required scaling, generated costs. And in some cases, when it wasn't properly scaled, it didn't allow for real-time reporting. So starting from such a state of affairs where on the AWS cloud, data from mobile applications traveled to DynamoDB as a database. From there, automatically using the Lambda function, they were written to the ClickHouse warehouse, which indeed required scaling. They were read either by external or internal applications or through reports. And this ecosystem, especially in this area, was a bottleneck in many aspects. So as one of the first steps, we expanded it slightly. So we see that certain parts remained unchanged. However, using the same mechanisms, or we were able to easily expand this ecosystem to include data writing to the GCP cloud using the BigQuery Vice Storage Write API. This enabled the use of the BigQuery warehouse, which scales automatically and has a different payment model. For using this warehouse, and in this case at this scale of data, it was much more advantageous, which I will discuss shortly. And after a short period, when we had already gone through the entire process, tested the data, tested the solution, we could simply disable certain elements, meaning we no longer replicated data to ClickHouse. Reports in the old tool were replaced by Looker Studio. However, what worked excellently, namely the database that was integrated with mobile applications, remained untouched. And for the client, the solution turned out to be much more efficient. This was possible because we can store data in BigQuery without worrying about scaling the warehouse. This data recording can occur at a speed of up to 3 gigabytes per second. So this is, well, with a large margin when it comes to the client's requirements. The reporting itself was also made available in a timely manner because thanks to the appropriate structure of this processing, using materialized views, the statistical data needed by internal teams were visible in reports within a few seconds. Above all, the costs have significantly decreased. These costs decreased by about 70%. In the case of costs, related to the data warehouse and data processing. This is related to the fact that the scale of this data was not large on a monthly basis, but there were very large spikes in the usage of this data, which required scaling the old version of the warehouse to high levels. However, the client did not have to worry about this in the new solution. Thanks to this, with this usage and data utilization, the cost dropped significantly. And what was crucial here in the case of gaming is primarily applicable in many other industries, because we can stream this data in logistics and transportation, or collect data from our factories and production lines in the manufacturing sector, or in e-commerce, if we want to track key data on what's happening on our sites during sales, promotional events that we want to monitor in real time. We can do that, and this architecture is very scalable, and this example is easy to replicate in many other industries. That's all from my side. If there are any questions, feel free to ask. You can also find me via this QR code. So if you would like to discuss your company's architecture in one or multiple clouds, feel free to set up a meeting.